The revolution will not be televised. It'll be tweeted. The revolution will not be televised. It will be double-tapped, liked, retweeted, reposted, favorited, and sent to you as a direct message in your inbox. The revolution will not be televised because the revolution of medical education is already here. Before we begin, I want to ask you a question. Are you a social media guru or a skeptic? Are you somewhere in between? How are you interacting with social media for your professional development? All right, let's see where we stand. Wow, a lot of people think that social media is a detriment. Good, okay, now that I know where we are as an audience, I have a confession to make, and that confession is that I'm a millennial. And according to this stock photo, what that means is that I wear tight pants and thick-rimmed glasses and cradle my technology lovingly, a stereotype that's clearly not accurate. But what it also means is that I would probably integrate social media into my life whether or not it was helpful. What I want to convince you of today is that despite my generational predisposition to loving social media in my professional career, it actually has value in your teaching and learning. Social media is powerful. Social media makes medical education better. The integration of social media and medical education really started to accelerate in 2012, at none other than a pub where most good ideas are started. This was in Dublin, at a conference where a couple emergency medicine physicians gathered to talk about the talks at the conference. They talked about the discussions and debates that those talks prompted. They talked about the opportunity to mentor junior colleagues, and the opportunity to challenge one another to be better. And one of the physicians, Mike Cadogan, said, wouldn't it be awesome if we didn't just do this one time a year? Wouldn't it be cool if we could do this year-round? And he believed that social media was the catalyst in order to do that. Rumor has it that he lifted his pint of Guinness that had a thick head of foam on the top, and it was here that the concept of foam was born. Free, open-access medical education. Foam is a concept, a community of people, an ethos that says that medical education should be free, and it shouldn't depend on your title. We should be able to connect experts with non-experts in community to discuss medical education content and take better care of patients. At the time that the foam concept was born, there were only a handful of social media platforms. And today, Facebook, Instagram, Reddit, Twitter, Vimeo, YouTube, Discord, I mean, the list goes on and on and on. We're going to focus our conversation on Twitter today, but realize it goes everywhere. I don't want to do a hard pump on the brakes, because I know I'm doing my millennial thing, talking about all these new agey concepts, and I believe there's at least one person in the room who feels like Dr. Milton Packard. He's a cardiologist and heart failure researcher out of Baylor, who went to a conference and was horrified to find that people were not reading major journals, major articles that were published a long time ago, things they should be reading. And so he published this editorial. The conversation that ensued on that editorial was basically like, oh, dude, we're getting our information from Twitter. Oh my goodness. Later, he then published this article, Do You Practice Twitter-Based Medicine? And I don't bring up Dr. Milton Packard to poke fun because the questions that he brings up are important ones. We should be reading primary literature. We should be making sure that the resources we are using are believable, trustworthy, and evidence-based. But my fear in engaging in this conversation is likely to look something like this, where I'm over here saying, look at the power of social media for your life, the career-accelerating nature of Twitter. And he is over here saying, any knucklehead can post to Twitter and tell lies. If you find yourself over here where Dr. Milton Packard is, I invite you to the other side, because I want to reframe the discussion. That yes, like anybody can post information, but social media is just a place where we can have conversation about content. And just like this very stage, at this very conference, the quality of that conversation, the evidence base of that conversation is only as good as the content that it is referencing. Social media is not inherently bad. It's powerful. It's powerful because it amplifies the number of circles where this conversation can take place. Social media makes medical education better. We're going to cover 3 major medical education theories and talk about how social media integrates into each one. And the first theory we're going to talk about is spaced repetition. Before I dive into this, I want to show you this graph, which is intuitive to anybody who has ever studied anything ever. Most of the information that you learn is forgotten. The brain is incredibly not great at retaining and remembering information. Sadly, speakers here, most of the stuff you said today, not remembered, unless we can figure out a way to study and remember and review. This is spaced repetition, the idea of multiple small feedings. The idea that with each review, each repetition, the slope of that forgetting curve lessens. We forget less and we remember more. Where does social media fit into this? At the time of my writing this talk, I promise I wasn't just cherry picking, this really was my feed. There is content on feedback, content on non-invasive positive pressure ventilation versus high flow for pre-oxygenating patients before emergency endotracheal intubation, content on tranexamic acid and epistaxis. The list goes on and on. There are journal clubs that you can participate in. There are experts that you can follow. You can follow SCCM and CHEST. This is a source for multiple small feedings. At a time where I'd be looking at memes and cats on the internet, I'm looking at medical education content, forgetting less. Social media makes medical education better because it interrupts the forgetting cycle that we are all subjected to. The second reason that social media makes medical education better is something called social constructivism. And this is the idea that all learning is constructed by individuals through social interaction. We believe this occurred ever since the prehistoric times. All of us enter the circle with our own knowledge, our own experiences, and we interact. And it is in that interaction where we talk, discuss, debate, argue, share ideas, do things together. And we leave that interaction with a negotiated meaning of what the truth is. We leave with new knowledge and new experiences that we can take to the next community. Social media amplifies this. Not only does it increase the number of people that we can exchange knowledge and experiences with, but it flattens the hierarchy so that those of us who have less power in medicine can interact with those who have more. It doesn't matter. Let me illustrate. I know that social media is the place where people post pictures of their food and selfies and this whole look at me narcissistic stereotype of social media. It's real, it's out there. But if you can transition your focus to look at this, see this content, see this thing that I'm doing, see this thing that my colleague's doing, it is powerful. I developed a podcast 2 years ago. It was really bad. It started as a pet project in my friend's basement, and we posted it, and we got some feedback like, yo, that's not good. Experts reached out to us who were in the podcasting community already, and they said, hey, why don't you try this? Why don't you buy this microphone? Why don't you try this technique instead? And since this time, our podcast now has a global impact. Over 60,000 listens across the entire world. We have been able to interview people like Donna Edelson, who wrote the early warning scores in sepsis. People like Antonio Ansueto, who have written the new updated gold guidelines. I never would have had this opportunity if I wouldn't have said, look at this. For those of you participating in traditional scholarship, you may be interested in tweetations or a twin-pact factor. This study showed that articles that were tweeted more had a greater scientific impact. And sure, like you can argue, well, that's just a correlational study. We don't know if it's that the tweets made the papers more scientifically impactful, or if it's just that scientifically impactful studies happen to be tweeted more. But to that, what does it matter? Impact is impact. This is about people reading and digesting your content. This is about knowledge translation from the lab to the bedside. You may also be interested in the visual abstract. A visual abstract is essentially a pictorial summary of your research findings. And this is a very meta study, a visual abstract about a study about visual abstracts. That's demonstrating if you use a visual abstract to summarize your findings, you increase the number of people that see your work by 20,000 here. That's powerful. Social media impacts your impact. But here's where I think social media really shines, and this is where some of you may actually be interested. We exist in a medical hierarchy. We have structural inequalities. It's not your fault, it's happened. Social media flattens that hierarchy. Researchers followed medical students who engaged in social media for professional development, what researchers are calling a digital ethnograph of their social media behaviors. And what they found was that social media plugged them into a broader network, unprecedented access to experts, to a community, to resources, to support. It gave them a voice in a system that unfortunately at times prioritizes rank, title, and status over quality of ideas. Social media flattened that hierarchy, and there's no better example than the tweet that I sent out to prepare for this talk. I didn't expect much. I only thought that like 3 or 4 people would respond. I'd be like, hey, here's an example, here's a story. No. 30,000 people saw this tweet. And it wasn't because I'm popular, it's because people said, let me elevate what you're trying to do and share that with my network. What came from this was people saying, hey, here's how social media impacted my career. Here's a copy of my grand round slides that I gave on social media. Here's an article, here's a resource. Hey, somebody sent me their phone number and said, like in Ireland, said, if you want to call, if I can mentor you to give you a better talk, if I can teach you how to design your slides better, just call me. I didn't because the toll charges are expensive, but you get the point. The resources are there. It didn't matter that I was a PA who didn't graduate all that long ago. What mattered was the quality of my ideas. Social media flattened that hierarchy. The second reason, or the third reason that social media makes medical education better is the zone of proximal development. This is the idea that every learner has a core set of knowledge and skills, things that they can do with effort, but without help. As educators, preceptors, mentors, attendings, which I hope in some way, shape, or form is everybody in this room, we have the obligation to reach into the zone just outside the core skill set, to give guidance and feedback so that learners can do more, so that they can develop proximally. How does social media fit into that? This is an attending who gave a great talk during rounds in the morning on the pharmacokinetics of furosemide. And despite the fact that they gave a great presentation, it felt like their teaching didn't really stick. After all, they had discharges and progress notes and things to write. The residents were distracted. So what did they do? They took 5 minutes to leverage and repurpose the education that they were already doing. They drew a little doodle on their iPhone and took a snapshot of the article that they were referencing, and they tweeted it. How is this impactful? Number one, it's a source of spaced repetition for the residents to digest at a later point in time. And number two, you are posting the content in their world, where they are already learning. Instead of looking at pictures of cats, they are remembering the teaching point that you supplied to them, and it doesn't take that much more effort. Here's another example of what we call a tweetorial. This is an attending who saw a very challenging patient in the MICU, and as you go through each thread, there are questions and polls and resources and links to articles and answers for how you would manage this patient. This probably didn't take that much more effort. It was probably a PowerPoint that they had that they just put on Twitter. Not only can you engage in this zone of proximal development with your learners through social media, but you can also have a global impact. Because I promise you, each of these attendings did not expect to have this tweet screenshotted and put on a national stage. They are teaching you indirectly how you can leverage and repurpose social media for your own teaching. And maybe at a later date, if you decide to engage with social media in this way, you can do the same for somebody else. Social media does make medical education better. Through spaced repetition, it interrupts forgetting. Through social constructivist theories, it flattens hierarchy so that those of us who have less power in our medical system have the same access and voice as those who have high power. And it gives us as educators, all of us here, the ability to extend the capabilities of our learners so that they can know and do more. So, to Dr. Milton Packer, and anybody else who's asking important questions like this, do you practice Twitter-based medicine? My answer is an emphatic no. I practice evidence-based medicine. Social media is simply the platform that connects me with other like-minded individuals, experts around the world who want to do the same, take better care of patients. If there's anything in this talk that resonated with you, if you want to know what my references were, if you want links, if you want a helpful article on how to make your own Twitter account, you can visit my website on medical education and critical care, teachme.icu. All of the presentation, handout, notes, links, and all that stuff is there. So for those of you who are already on social media for professional development, for those of you who I've convinced to make a Twitter account, I can't wait to learn and grow with you. For those of you who are like, nah, still not going to do it, that's fine. But hear this, the very reason that you don't want to join social media, that there's untrustworthy content, is the very reason that we need you. We need to see how you interact with untrustworthy content. We need to see the things that you post, the articles that you amplify, and we need you to show us how we can be better critical appraisers of online and digital content. Revolution will not be televised. The social media and the revolution of medical education, it's already here. Thank you. One last question for you, sorry.
Any questions for Jeremy while you guys are answering the poll question?
Please.
How do you screen out all the vitriol? Stuff gets really hard to be very precise on such short tweets.
Yeah, so the question is how do you kind of filter out the vitriol, filter out things that you don't want to see, and it's hard. I like Twitter because it has a character limit. It used to be 180, I think, now it's 240. It makes people be concise. It makes people say the things that they mean the things that they say, and it really makes it so that you're posting content as opposed to just liking Emory, which I feel like other social media platforms tend to encourage that. Twitter actually has, so like let's say you didn't want to see things about politics, you could insert whatever keywords you don't want to hear about in your filters, and then it just takes them out of your social media feed. That's the first way. And the second way is to make sure that the people you're following are posting good content. You know, there are plenty of people who I follow like, man, I don't want to see that anymore. And you unfollow them. And then you follow the people who are doing good things, and it makes it so that your content is curated just for you. Yeah, please.
That tweet that you sent out before your lecture, you said you had a 60,000 response. How do you filter that so you don't turn that into electronic textbook yourself?
Sure.
60,000 views. 30,000
views.
Okay.
Misleading, not 30,000 responses. I'm not that famous yet, so I don't know. I hope not to be, but I suppose you have to turn off the notifications at that point. There's plenty of big names in social media who are getting tweet after tweet after tweet after tweet, and I imagine if we're all medical professionals like that, it's really hard to filter through. So I don't know the answer. Yeah, please.
Can you maybe make a comment either based on your experience or your thoughts on patient discussions?
Patient discussions on social media are very controversial, and the canned answer to that is if you are posting patient discussions, you need to know the social media policy of the institution that you are working for so that everything that you're doing is copacetic. But beyond that, you need to make sure that you're not posting any patient identifiers. No names, no specific ages, change details, and especially the one that gets people most often is time. So people in a small hospital will say like, hey, we had this really cool ARDS patient today. And people can put the details together and say like, I know somebody who had ARDS today at this hospital. So you need to be careful. Really, I think the most important thing is know the social media policy of your institution and protect patient privacy.
One more. Is there a way to actually, in your, say on ICU rounds, you have 20 or 30 people in your institution or doing rounds and you want to share that educational content. Is there a way to electronically confine it to those people without going beyond?
Yes, yeah. So the question was like, let's say that you as an instructor have a cohort of people who want to learn from you. Is there a way to make it so you're not blasting information to everybody, but just to them? Yeah, you can direct message things, you can make Facebook groups that are private, you can make a Reddit server that's private, and you can email me, I'll send you all the places that you can do that. There are plenty of platforms where you can have a private group where you share your own educational information in that way with people you want. Yeah, please.
So do you maintain a personal Twitter profile and a professional Twitter profile?
I do. The question was, do I maintain a personal and professional Twitter profile? I do that for most of the social media streams I'm on. The big things I'm on for professional development are Instagram and Twitter, and I have a separate Twitter for Atlanta United team, and another Twitter for all my professional development content. And then my personal feeds where I post pictures of my kids and that kind of stuff, they're private. You can't find them. Thank you all so much.